Welcome to the Good, the Bad, and the Weird podcast. I'm Nicho.
And I'm Chris.
And today we have a very special guest with us. Longtime friend and retired streamer, Sugi of Sugi Logic and the Sugiverse, to talk about one of the most interesting movies that we've watched in a while, Seed of Chucky. Welcome in, Sugi.
Hell yeah. Hi, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, anytime, man. I wish I had you on the show more, but it's been a busy couple years, so
definitely. But this is the perfect movie to have you for.
I'm gonna hit you with hard questions right from the get-go, Sugi.
Oh boy.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm ready.
How many men does it take to jerk off one small puppet?
5.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm glad you know that.
It takes 5. Hell yeah. So how recently did you watch this movie then? Because I just rewatched it today.
I rewatched it over, I think, like a week ago, because I have to pass the DVD off to Chris to watch, so.
And I watched it on both Sunday and again on today.
You watched it twice?
I did, and I'm not giving him his DVDs back, because to do that, I didn't get to watch all the other Chuckies on his DVD collector set. So I will be getting through the rest of them again before he can have his discs back.
Okay, very cool. Awesome.
So, Sugi, I did want to talk to you a little bit about slasher movies before we get into Seed of Chucky, just because, I mean, almost all the horror movies you end up suggesting to me end up being like slasher of some kind or another. Of all the slashers you love, why did you want to cover Seed of Chucky?
I wanted to cover Seed of Chucky just because it's a movie that my opinion constantly changes on it, so it's one that's just going to be fun. What I would say about Seed of Chucky is my enjoyment of it completely depends on what mood I'm in when I'm watching it, because it's just a stupid, crazy comedy, and if I'm in a really just like funny mood, I'm gonna love it. I'm gonna give it a 10 out of 10. But if I'm having a really bad day and I'm in a serious mood, I'm giving it a 1 out of 10. It's just a movie, it's a different experience every time I watch it, because how I feel that day determines my enjoyment of the movie. So that's why I picked Seed of Chucky. There's no movie like Seed of Chucky. It is truly one of a kind.
No, and definitely like with the with just how the Child's Play series go, because this one specifically was written and directed by John Mancini and
Don
Don
D-O-N.
Yeah, I thought I said Don. I didn't realize this is his directorial debut, despite having created the franchise.
It sure
and he
is.
went on to do this, Curse of Chucky, and Cult of Chucky.
Yes, and the Chucky show, which was 3 seasons, like almost 10 episodes each season. I don't know if he directed every episode, but he wrote the story for every episode.
Okay, yeah, I didn't do too much digging into it past that. But this one does star Brad Dourif as Chucky.
It sure does.
Jennifer Tilly as herself, and coming back as Tiffany.
She did a lot of heavy lifting in this movie. Let's not lie to ourselves. She's like half this film.
She's the star of the movie. She's the main. She's the main reason. She is the movie.
She really is. We're here mostly for her.
Yeah. And one thing I didn't realize after this is probably like the third time I've watched this movie. Billy Boyd of Lord of the Rings fame is Glenn/Glenda,
also known as
Shithead.
Shitface.
Shitface. Pippin. It's impressive because both voices do sound kind of different, like towards the end when he and she are switching from Glenn and Glenda. I'm like, oh wait, Billy Boyd is both. That's impressive that he was both voices.
Yeah.
I when I was listening to him, I couldn't help but think of he's the one who sings to the King and Lord of the Rings, right?
Yeah, with the nasty tomato scene.
Yeah,
yes.
That's that kind of voice that I think he just got right into for that. It's like, I can't not think of those two now.
Yes. Yeah.
And he's so perfect because, like, he had, like, I love that they didn't try and write, because famously, like, he's not great at not a British accent. Like, and his neutral American-ish accent is just really okay. And they didn't even try and write him with a normal accent. They're just like, no, you can just be yourself because you have such a neutral but good British accent that I don't think anyone's going to clock you as, like, oh, Billy's the one doing this.
I agree. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, that's one thing that I thought was funny too, is just how all over the place this movie is with some of the jokes that they got going. And I don't know if it's intentionally supposed to be funny, because I mean, he thinks
100% it is.
Well, he thinks he's
Yes,
Japanese.
it is.
I think that right there should be your clue, is that he says konnichiwa to his parents.
Well, but he also
And he says hello in Japanese, and he like says like mother and father in Japanese as well.
Yeah.
He learns kung fu
Tosa.
because he thinks that he, with his British accent and his white boy aesthetic, is Japanese.
It's hilarious.
Even when he turns into human children, he's still not Japanese.
Yes, but like you said, it's definitely intentional, 100%.
In fact, I think this movie, I know Bride of Chucky also had a lot of humor. I think this movie specifically pushed the Chucky franchise out of like true horror and into that black comedy realm. Like unmistakably. Like at this point, people are like, okay, maybe we missed more humor in the rest of the movies that we weren't paying attention for. Because this one was hilarious.
Yeah, it was. So funny.
And honestly, with this one, I did a very minute amount of research for what I had time for. I didn't realize that the Child's Play franchise was conceived as a franchise from the get-go.
Oh, yeah.
I thought like maybe, okay, because the first two are so connected, they thought of part one. If it does well, we can do part two. And obviously, I mean, Sugi and I, we've seen these quite a few times, but the third one has some cool stuff, but isn't the best. True. And just, I guess I never really fully noticed that transition between like the true horror of the first three movies to the comedy that is Bride, because that's where they're like, we're going to go full rom-com parody. And then Seed of Chucky is just, they did, okay, we've done the whirlwind romance and drama. Well, let's do a family domestic bullshit.
It is a family domestic bullshit, though.
Exactly. And the main reason was because the first three movies, like you just said, they're mainly just like straightforward killer doll horror, supposed to be spooky slasher movie. And then the third one just kind of like underperformed a little bit financially. So that's why they changed it up. And it was mainly because I think Scream came out before Bride of Chucky, and so they're like, well, they're doing meta funny horror, so we're just going to copy them because that's the popular thing now. But that's why they changed it up, because they did the same thing 3 times in a row, and it was making less and less money.
Well, and it was also like the trend of the time, too. Like, we saw a bunch of horror movie franchises go from being like really serious to a little bit like almost bad by their second or third iteration to then almost humorous again, just to try and get people reeled back in. And even though Chucky had like some idea of like what the story and like plan was, like Don had Chucky figured out before he got here, but he also did play a whole bunch with it, because like this wasn't truly the original version of Seed of Chucky. This had a lot of reworking that it got done. Granted, I think it all worked and I'm happy with it, but
me too. It's perfect the way it is.
I agree, and I think this one is honestly, from the interviews, because there's a podcast that I listened to where Don was on talking about specifically Seed of Chucky and his like creation with it, and he talks about how like the original one, like I was always going to move this franchise to be sillier and goofier because like people weren't quite getting the point, but I wasn't going as silly as I did when like originally I got turned down for Seed of Chucky. Like, originally they told me, no, this is too stupid, this is too much, and I quote, too gay.
Yep. That is true.
And so his response was to essentially make it gayer.
Yes. So he took the South Park approach of making the cuts as worse and worse as he could do with trying to get around what they were trying to censor.
Yes, because originally this wasn't Seed of Chucky, it was Son of Chucky.
Yep.
And Don is famously very openly gay, and that's part of the reason why Chucky is like so big in the gay community as like a gay icon, right? Because Don has been open and like supportive and very like aware of who he is and his influence in the world, even before Seed of Chucky. And then when Son of Chucky got shot down for him like being directly told like, no, this is way too gay, you got to tone it down, he went, bet, what if I instead made it more gay?
And got John Waters to be in the movie, which he is also amazing.
Okay, so that explains a lot more for me, because like I guess I never understood why he went the whole John or Ed Wood reference with Glenn and Glenda for the child.
Yep.
100% because Dawn went, what if I made it even gayer? What if we like really tackled some of the hard-hitting problems that horror's known for, right? Like horror's always been an open space for the others. What if instead of just having horror that like touches on that but like isn't necessarily directly at it, what if I take the fact that they're dolls and just really go ham on it?
Mm-hmm.
And it worked. Like, yes, a lot of people bitched about it, but this movie made a shit ton of money, so like it worked.
It did work, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Like,
exactly.
I'm sure if he got a second chance at making Seed of Chucky, he would make it exactly the same way all over again. No regrets.
I would hope so. However, in the podcast, he did let it slip that there was one change he was originally hoping for, and I see the vision. So, Redman the role was originally offered to Quentin Tarantino to play himself. Quentin Tarantino was to play himself in the role of Redman.
Which one's Redman again?
Redman's the rapper who's like the director that Jennifer Tilly's trying to like hook up with and be like,
the Virgin Mary. Yeah.
And that role was originally written with Quentin Tarantino in mind. And Quentin said, no, thank you.
Oh, God. He would have been so perfect in that, though.
It would have been great. I can see why Quentin was like, I don't know.
Not enough feet for him.
But, like, this was at the point, because this is 2004. People knew about the feet by this point. Mm-hmm. We could have played that in. Like, there could have been puppet feet on top of puppet tits.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Like, I feel like if this movie was to be remade, that'd be my one request, is that Quentin Tarantino fulfills his destiny.
That would be pretty sweet. I didn't know that. Thanks for sharing.
Well, speaking of the cast, so I know you love Tilly. What did you think of her like playing herself as like both Tiffany and Tilly?
Yeah, so she's the reason that the movie works, just because a lot of the humor is just based around Jennifer Tilly. Just like as an example, like a joke that's not even that funny, but comes off as really funny because it's Tiffany, Jennifer Tilly's voice talking about herself. Jennifer Tilly is like when they knock Redmond and Jennifer unconscious and they're just dragging their bodies like across the house and up the stairs. And she's like, God, she's so fat and she's not even pregnant. It's just so many mean jokes about Jennifer Tilly that she's delivering herself as Tiffany. I think it's what makes the movie so funny, and the majority of the comedy I feel like is based around making fun of Jennifer Tilly, and that's like all the best comedy bits in my opinion. The best ones are all the ones she's doing, just because it's her making fun of her. I think she's great, in my opinion.
Yeah, and in that way, for at least these two movies, the movie kind of shifts away from a focus on Chucky and is more of a focus on her as a character. So it gives her those two movies to really develop instead of just kind of becoming this stagnant character altogether.
And it really expands the whole idea of like how to twist the idea of a Scream Queen, because like Jennifer Tilly as herself is definitely Scream Queen material for this movie. There's plenty of good moments of shock, horror, and scare, but she's also the one murdering herself. So like it does. Yes. It's like a really great play that I like. How else could you possibly have this sort of scenario set up without this being the format?
Yes, and I'm really glad that Jennifer Tilly works so well as both characters, because I would say, like, I've said it many times, I love this movie, but I think the main reason why this is most Chucky fans' least favorite movie is because Chucky himself, while he's in the movie a lot, he barely does anything for the majority of the movie. He's just showing up every other scene. He's like, hey, I'm here, and then he doesn't really do anything. Like, he only gets, I think, 2.5 kills throughout the whole movie, and the only 2 that he gets are solo kills or like in the last 10 minutes of the movie as well. So like he barely does anything because it's mostly a Jennifer Tilly and Tiffany and Glenn Glenda movie. But that's why it's good, because Jennifer Tilly and Tiffany work so well. But I think that's why most Chucky fans dislike this one, because Chucky is kind of on the sidelines for the majority of the movie.
Well, it also does change the style of movie to begin with. Like, as we've said, it goes more full comedy. Mm-hmm. But on top of that, it becomes more of like a meta movie where it's just a way to bring... I know it's a cheesy way to bring back Chucky and Tiffany again, because they died at the end of the last movie, like died.
Yeah.
But they get brought into a movie of Chucky that's being made about them. And it just made me think a little bit of like the Human Centipede 2 and Human Centipede 3, where each progressive one. In Human Centipede 2, the first movie's a movie in that world, and then in Human Centipede 3, the first and second movie are movies in those worlds as well. So it's that kind of like self-awareness that
100%.
I guess I can see that not working for people, because it's not like it's not their kind of humor, or they want it to be, they're expecting a certain branding with the movies that came before. And even then, that rebranding with Bride of Chucky is a completely different trajectory from the original trilogy.
Well, and the Chucky fans, especially because of how fast the Chucky franchise honestly really came out, like these movies didn't take decades to get like a whole set. We had them pretty close together. So like you could really binge watch a bunch of Chucky movies kind of out of the gate as a Chucky fan. And while I love this movie, it is not lost on me that like going from even Bride of Chucky to this one, you have to like suspend a lot of like past lore to get this movie to work. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you're a binge movie person, it kind of messes with you a little bit.
Yeah, it's like this movie is nothing like the previous 4 movies at all.
Yeah. You gotta reframe who Jennifer Tilly is in this film, because she was in the last one. That character died. It's not technically the same character as these, but like I guess kind of it was. And like, you know, the Bride of Chucky's ending kind of crisped up the dolls, and now they're fine. Like, is this the same dolls? Is this new dolls? Like, they don't really tell you properly.
They do. It's because they revived the animated dolls from the movie that's filming for the Chucky remake.
Yeah, it's rough. It's a little bit rough, especially if you're like binging them. If you're just watching them straight out and you like, I don't know, maybe start with this movie, I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But I don't think most Chucky fans do. I think a lot of us kind of like Jason style, like we start at number 1 and we work our way through the lineup.
Mm-hmm. What was I going to say? I was going to say, you mentioned like Human Centipede, but it also it's just like Scream and Stab. How Stab are the movies inside the Scream movies about the murders that happen in the Scream movies. So they do the same thing with Seed of Chucky. The other funny thing, which you probably both already know, is the guy who is his name is Tony Gardner. He was the animatronic guy in the movie who got killed by Chucky and Tiff. He did the actual animatronics on the movie, so he actually just played himself as well in the movie and killed himself as well. So he had to make like the fake head of himself that got decapitated from his body, which is just funny.
What an honor to get to murder yourself in a movie.
Yeah.
Yes. While playing yourself as well.
But it's also I like that they lean into that cheesiness quite a bit too, because with them reviving through the set of the movie Chucky, like I was watching, I forgot that's how they got revived.
Yeah.
And you can clearly see the edges of the set with Santa walking through.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, this is really, really bad. Like they're really leaning into like how low budget these have had to get. It's like, oh no, okay, this is a movie set about the old Chucky's being not really well shot to begin with.
Yeah. It was supposed to look bad.
I won't lie though, it was kind of a nice like almost behind the scenes sneak peek of like, oh yeah, these are animatronics, and because you do kind of forget that in the first 2 movies, because like yeah, they're a little rough, but like it's dark enough, they're slashery enough that like you kind of let it slide. And then in this film they like really hammer home, they're like, no, there is a man behind the puppet. In fact, there's 5 men behind the puppet.
Yeah. Giving him that a good old reach around.
I don't know if you saw any behind the scenes from the other movies, but in the original one, the first Child's Play, they did use animatronics, but for a lot of scenes, they used just a short person in a costume for a lot of the scenes. But I think all the rest of them, they used animatronics, whereas the first one, they had short person, they used some puppets, and then some animatronics. But I'm pretty sure all the other ones is just purely animatronics for the Chuckies and the dolls and the Tiffany's and the Glendas.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference between like what you would prefer the killer dolls to be, like as far as special effects between those 3?
Ooh.
Do either of you have a preference?
So I've for other reasons, I've watched a lot of, or not a whole lot, but a fair amount of killer doll movies since I originally watched this. I mean, we even did one with Laufenstein of Pinocchio's Revenge.
An
That
awful
was
movie.
a horrible, horrible movie.
Yeah.
That movie sucks. Yeah, I hate that movie.
But I think I'm one person who's always for practical effects. So whatever route they do to achieve that, whether it's animatronics or someone in a costume, I think that's always going to stand out better than if they go to do CGI down the line.
100%.
But like even if they did, I think the one thing I would say with the practical effects is keep it within the realm of either puppeteering or someone in a suit. Because the moment you start going into stop motion animation, it kind of loses it a little bit if you're going between all three of those styles.
Yeah.
Stick to the two more realistic ones, or go full on stop motion like the Puppet or the Doll Master series.
Oh yeah. See, I have a very strong preference for either the Puppet plus little person combo, because not only in horror do I think that combo has proven to work really well, but just in movie making in general, like that combo of actor plus close up for puppet has always like made a very like long-term standing movie where it still looks really good, it's still compelling, and then you get like more fun tidbits, like you get another actor, you get a new person who he's usually just a guy in a suit, but like you get to follow a new person pretty much for like the acting. But I do have a small soft spot for the animatronic horrors, because eventually those animatronic horrors get de-skinned, and then you get new horror of animatronics running around somewhere in the backstage of Hollywood without their skins on, and that could eventually be a movie. And so I need more animatronic horror movies to happen so that we have enough backup stuff for someone to eventually make me a movie about terrifying animatronics.
Willy's Wonderland.
Similar styling, yes.
It's a great movie. I agree. I feel like the scariest one is the combination of short person and puppet, like the original movie did. But I do love the animatronics. I think, especially on these movies, they do a really good job. Another just random thought I had since we were talking about this topic is in Seed of Chucky, like Chucky and Tiffany on the movie set, they had like all those wires like plugged into their back. Like whatever happened to those plugs the rest of the movie? Were they still on their backs the whole time, or did they disappear?
Got covered by the clothes.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about that.
It's just a random thing I thought about. Yeah, but I'm like, do they still have those plugs on their backs like for the rest of this franchise? Now I'm just thinking about that.
Well, it's also a fun little bit too in that scene where they are getting deep unplugged, where they put them next to like the other greats of like Frankenstein and Wolfman.
Yeah.
Where it's like, hey, we're one of the cool club now.
We're not one of the dumb animatronics. We're one of the good ones.
We're cool now.
But I do want to talk about Glenn/Glenda a little bit, because I do think there's a lot going for this character, especially like in the very beginning of the movie, where they set it up where it feels very standard Chucky movie, where it's the doll vision.
I like doll vision.
But they do the couple little things of like, you see part of the clothes, so you're like, okay, that clothing's not Chucky.
True.
And then you do get like the quick glimpse of it, and like, okay, what the hell is that thing? But I do like that they immediately bring up that they immediately show that he's not like either of his parents, because he's remorseful about his killing. He doesn't really want to dive into it, so he's very conflicted, and I think that goes to deal with a lot of him trying to figure out who he is as a person. And on top of that, the family drama that they build up, I do think it's very clever making him Glenn/Glenda, because instead of doing like your standard family drama movie where you have the son character and the female character, you have them combined as one, because they explain that he absorbed his twin or something, so that's why he's got two personalities. But by combining those characters, you cut down the cast. You don't have to build up so much drama of the mom wants the daughter to do this, the father wants the son to follow in his footsteps. Instead, it's the same person that they're having to force to pull apart one way or the other.
True. And also just like an interesting way to rehandle identity crisis. Because I mean, like, the whole, like, oh, I'm good, I don't want to murder people. By 2004, we've seen.
Mhm.
Still cool, but, you know, this is Chucky. We're supposed to be pushing the envelope somehow. And this is honestly a pretty good way of doing it, of having, like, well, what if they're neither? What if they're both and neither simultaneously? Because it is a doll. You know? And, like, I also appreciate that from the get-go, they're like, yeah, by the way, Glenn Glenda, they're ugly. They're super ugly.
Yeah.
They're very sweet on the inside, but boy, man, what an ugly puppet.
That's a terrifying puppet. I'll move mine so you can see mine here.
Yeah, there they are in their glory.
Yes.
And like, and I think the reason that they like bring it up and hammer it so hard, like honestly, like I kind of enjoy it, is because especially like OG Chucky before he adds all his scars and shaves his hair and all that sort of stuff, the dolls that Chucky is based off of are not really that scary. They're just kind of creepy because they're big dolls. Whereas Glenn Glenda, from the get-go, out the box, is a terrifying doll.
Yes.
Yeah.
No additions or like haircuts needed. Maybe could use one, but like
I thought Glenda was Glenda was scarier, like in the white dress, like with the blonde wig and the makeup. So like she was even more terrifying than Glenn. But I do agree, like with what you said, like with that opening where it's like the point of view, like kind of Halloween opening, like that was some pretty scary stuff. Like the murders where the mom got killed in the shower and then the dad just was like, out of the blue, he's just talking to his daughter and he's like, you shouldn't leave your toys out. Like, you lied to me. And she's just like, I didn't leave them out. Then just out of the blue, he just gets stabbed. Yeah. Like, those are some good kills. That was like a good horror sequence. So they did definitely, like, I think the design, like you said, is very terrifying. So it works. But then also because it's a comedy movie, that's what keeps it interesting, because I don't know, it's just a very unique character. And I also agree that it's a very smart way to do it. It's a very unpredictable way, just like you said. It's not like, oh, mom wants the kid to be nice, dad wants the kid to be evil. By having two personalities in it, it's just, you don't know what's going to happen next. Even when rewatching it, I don't remember every single beat of the plot. Keeps it interesting every time. So I agree with everything both of you said.
Well, that's actually going back to that intro. It's also a clever way of setting up the premise of the movie, where they're in a way destroying the quote unquote nuclear family, both physically.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, also like, especially with this being Don's like debut for directing, I think the overly blatant like nods to other horror movies actually kind of is a nice touch of like really feeling like he's been paying attention to the genre and like, yes, this is a very goofy movie. It's not like his other Chucky writings, but he is taking this serious as a horror. Like he is like learning from the other ones. Like he knows where to pull the jabs. He knows what pieces to like reference. And it kind of like lets you in on like, okay, throughout the rest of this movie, there's going to be other things that he's going to talk about or reference that like, if you're a hardcore horror fan, those are fun to look for.
I also feel like a lot of the kills that do happen, I think my favorite one is the John Waters kill where the acid falls on his face. Like that looks just beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Like the few horror things they do in the movie are done really well, in my opinion.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, it's great because it also that kill is pure accident. Like they intended to kill him in the first place, but it just is like a complete fuck up on Glenda's fault that it happens. And it's just like, okay, so all of this is kind of an accident.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, and like, I don't know, there's room to have like the discussions of like the idea of like the killings being an addiction is like a fun other twist too. Cause like, I guess, yeah, for them it kind of is. Chucky clearly doesn't care, but you know, she feels like it's important, and still we get some pretty cool kills because like one's not that bad.
Rome wasn't built in a day.
Yeah.
Her trying to cut it cold turkey is kind of like I bring up this book series so many times. The Hurts of Childhood. It makes me think of that a little bit, where it's trying to like break that generational trauma.
Yeah, she feels like she's trying to have it all. She's trying to be the perfect person, and yet, man, killing's just so hard to give up.
That's more of just the humor that she does Jennifer Tilly makes work so well as Tiffany. Like, I love the 2 phone call scenes where she calls just like the wife of some dude that she killed, and the wife is just like it's just crying.
It's such a short phone call too.
And Tiffany's like, "Oh, I feel so much better." And then when she wants to kill Redmond, so she calls like the hotline, and she's like, "I'm gonna mess up," and he just like tells her like, "Oh, it's okay, Rome wasn't built in a day." Just the way they handled like killing as an addiction and just made fun of it. Like, it's really something that you shouldn't make fun of, but they do it in just a really funny way that you can't not laugh at how they do it.
Yeah.
It's very funny. And she, once again, Jennifer Tilly just does it perfect.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But that's another thing that I think is great about this movie is it's not just poking fun at itself, it's making fun of the industry altogether.
100%.
Especially with like John, like one, again, Tilly whoring herself out as to get the role of the Virgin Mary.
So stupid. I love it.
But also just like how John Waters' character is just this really creepy guy trying to get like the scoop on what's going on.
Yeah.
And like the way they play into kind of how people are like, oh, the elites of Hollywood. And not that Tilly's an elite of Hollywood, but they're just like, oh, the celebrities always have something weird going on. And like he's looking through the window and he's like, a masturbating midget. It's like, all right.
Okay, take some pictures.
Well, and I know Redmond wasn't the original like design for that character. He wasn't the original actor, but I feel like it ended up being perfect because like unless you were into rap, I think a lot of people don't realize that he was famous outside of acting. Did you not know he was a famous rapper, Nico?
I had to look him up. I'm so out of the music scene.
So is he, don't worry. But that's kind of why it works is because like unless you're, I don't know, like a fan of old school rap or like following Redmond specifically, he's not a high A-list actor that I think the general public is going to be like, oh yeah, that dude. It's just kind of like a guy in a horror film next to Jennifer Tilly. So like, who also like, unless you know who Jennifer Tilly is, like I would argue she's also not necessarily like a everyday household name, especially anymore. And I think it kind of adds up into like another good little like talking point for this movie. I just think that the choices of both Jennifer Tilly, who like unless you already know coming in who she is, and also Redmond, who like unless you were into rap, especially like early 2000s to late 90s rap, like these aren't names that like every household knows. And so they kind of end up being almost like they're not true B-list actors, right? But they're close, especially watching the movie now after all these years where like it adds to like the guy in the creepy camera being like, yes, the people I don't know, I'll take pictures.
Well, that works because John Waters is also kind of in that realm too, where he's mainstream enough, but not like full mainstream.
Not true B-list, but not like a heavy hitter name grabbing person anymore, with maybe the exception of Tilly.
I was going to say, I don't think I can name one song by Redmond, but I knew who Redmond was because of the video game Def Jam Fight for New York. He was a character in that game. So I knew who he was from that game before I saw him in Seed of Chucky. But I've never listened to a Redmond song. I can't name one Redmond song. So if you didn't know any of his music, Nico, I didn't either.
Well, I think the movie even kind of like knows that that's the case because they have a famously not Britney Spears. Britney Spears is like permanent lookalike.
Yes.
And like unless you're a hardcore Britney fan, you're not going to clock that that's not Britney.
I looked her up, and that's like the only role she's ever in is Britney lookalike.
No, that's her professional. Like that was her whole life. Oh, up until honestly, I think maybe kind of recently. Don't get me wrong. Like I don't follow the Britney lookalike. I follow Britney. But like no, that was her whole thing. Was that she was Britney's like I wouldn't say professional lookalike, but everyone knew who she was because she was such a close double for Britney that she would take on roles that clearly you were supposed to confuse her for Britney Spears. And this is one of them. She would show up at paparazzi events and people would be like, Britney. And she'd be like, yes. And you'd be like, you're not Britney though. Like she did this a lot. Like this is how she got famous was by being a Britney impersonator.
Yeah.
And I feel like the movie knew that people were not gonna like wait for the credits to roll to be like, was that Britney who died 5 seconds after her appearance? It was not.
And she did look exactly like her, though. It's very convincing.
She does. She looks exactly like her. And like this is it's a common thing in Hollywood. We have others, like there's a girl famous for looking just like Ariana Grande. That's the current one, right? And I don't know her name either because again, I don't follow the lookalikes. But if you follow the celeb, you know that there's the lookalike because they show up in pictures and you're like, it's so close, but you're not them. And unless you're a hardcore fan, you probably wouldn't know.
Well, now we've got deepfakes.
And now we have deepfakes, which I don't think Seed of Chucky was ever prepared for.
No.
Maybe the next Chucky movie.
I hope there's a next Chucky movie.
I do too. I really do too.
Seed of Chucky, I believe, was the last one that got a theatrical release because they did a remake in like 2018 or 2019, but that one was not done by Universal. It was done by Orion Pictures because I think they they still had the rights to the original movie somehow, but they sold the rights to the sequels. And so there was like a legal battle for it. So I don't really count that one as like a main canon Chucky movie because it's not. So I still say Seed of Chucky was the last one that was theatrical release of like this main story. So I hope we get another one.
Yeah, the rest all went straight to video.
Yeah, it's a fun icon. I wonder what they do with it because that's one other thing that this movie I felt pushed further is like the sexualness of Chucky. I mean, he's always been really aggressive in that regard, but
he's Chucky.
Yeah, they took it a step further, especially with the intro with the
science lesson.
Yeah, by the way, this is the second movie we've covered where the title card is splooge covered.
Yeah, this one I know a lot of people hate. I think after the third time I watched this one, it got better. Not in like it's growing on me sort of way, but in like it could be worse sort of way.
Oh, yeah. Well, like the turkey baster pregnancy and that whole like...
I mean, we get to see... For this movie's credit, we do get to see 2 sets of different tits. So, there is that.
I think the opening worked for me because the music, I thought the theme was really good. I didn't care for the visuals, but I enjoyed the music, so it was good enough.
I will say it's more cartoony than Ichi the Killer.
100% it is. Everything is more cartoony than Ichi the Killer. Yes. Hyper realisticness.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I was just saying it is funny in the intro how like when they show the CGI baby, they show the made in Japan on the arm.
On the wrist.
Yeah.
I do kind of want to talk about the ending of this movie just a little bit because like we brought it up that Glenn/Glenda really loses it. I think that's a great moment too because they do the whole kind of Chucky losing it to begin with as well too.
Sure.
And I like where they parody stuff without like fully going into it, like the whole Shining bit where he's busting through the door.
Fantastic.
And then he's like, "Fuck, I forgot what I was gonna say."
So good.
It's like fuck it, and he just jumps in.
Yeah. I think that's just the whole not giving a shit moment of the rest of the movie. Of
definitely,
they're just like, well, we're already here, we got to end it, and like the whole like trying to possess Tilly and whatnot. It's
a mess.
Yeah,
the end is an absolute mess, but I do enjoy that it does like defy those expectations.
Oh yeah,
I think that ending is so good. I think it's like the ending sequence is like one of the few sequences in the movie where we just get like Chucky at full power because like I said earlier, for most of the movie, Chucky is just on the sidelines. He's just letting Tiffany have her way. And it just, like you said, it's just such an unorganized mess of a plan that he's just like, fuck it, I'm going to just stay a doll. And I'm just going to be a doll forever. But the whole ending sequence at the hospital is so good because it ends up being Glenn who doesn't want to who has to kill Chucky because he wants to avenge his mother. I thought that was just perfect way to end this crazy story.
Yeah, it was a poetic way of him embracing his his family, his genetical desires, and he has to do it to his dad.
And just kind of wraps up the whole idea of like, if when you imagine a family based off of Chucky, the family not murdering each other really can't exist, because otherwise it's not truly Chucky.
Yeah, well, kind of, because that's the other thing too, is when it cuts to like the ahead of time where Tilly has 2 redhead children, it's just like, I question a lot of this, but okay, that works, I guess. His seed runs deep, and the children are psycho and human somehow, even though
we don't question that part. We don't question voodoo magic.
We won't think about it. It makes perfect sense.
Are they full of microplastics?
We're all full of microplastics.
Everybody is. Yeah, everybody is. It makes perfect sense, Nico.
Well, and it's also, it's such as, I do like it because it's a way that Tilly carries on. Well, Tiffany carries on as Tilly.
Jennifer Tilly. Yeah.
But also it's the Chucky never, it goes back to Chucky never dies. They get shipped a package and it's just his arm that comes out.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like to imagine that the arm got there as like kind of a warning, and the rest of his body is kind of,
he didn't all fit in the box.
No, each part is like kind of dragging itself off to the house.
That would be funny.
Well, and I know some fans of just horror in general are not a fan of the ending where it clearly leaves it open for more, like, for more movies. I am not in that camp. I am strongly in the, I want an ambiguous ending that promises me like 18 more sequels and all of them are to be garbage.
The Descent 2.
Yes, which I hate just as much as almost anything. But I love it too because, like, truthfully, all the movies that I come back to and rewatch regularly are movies that never got more but promised me something. Example being my favorite movie is Van Helsing. That movie promised me an 18-part miniseries and gave me jack shit. But I rewatch it regularly because that what if, the like letting your audience like think about these characters more and like imagine new scenarios feels more rewarding than like giving like a final ending, especially for horror.
That's a good point. I agree with that. That's really cool.
Well, and that ties back a little into our talking about Hellraiser, where the whole point of Hellraiser is just a story. They didn't have the idea to cross the T's and dot the I's, and that's how, like, I think that's why, like, for Americans, because Hellraiser was originally going to be a British movie.
That makes more sense.
But this one, I think that's probably why people have issues with it too, is because one, it is 100% the outlier of the Chucky movies.
Definitely.
But also it's that ambiguous ending where, like Sugi said, this is kind of like the end of that original Chucky line. The next ones don't really build off of that original lineup. It's kind of its own thing, kind of like how New Line did their own Jason Voorhees series, just so that way they could do they're Jason movies, but they're not canon Jason movies.
One thing I will ask you: so, have neither of you seen or watched any of the Chucky show?
No,
haven't gotten to the show yet.
But are you planning on it at some point?
When it comes out on DVD, yes. But I suck at watching TV so much.
It is out on DVD. I will just say, and I won't spoil anything, the story does continue. The Seed of Chucky story continues. It does.
Okay. And this is part of my theory of why stupid things, like, even if they don't truly go together, even if the story doesn't like properly like continue to mesh, it still ends up working because fans will spend all their fucking free time trying to make a web to like have everything fit in a universe, and that's more fun than just experiencing all these things solo. Otherwise Zelda would be a boring franchise.
And I mean, with this one, so you said your opinion of this movie ranges from what mood you're in.
So did the critics.
As a whole, I on the other side, I used to absolutely hate this movie.
That tracks.
And I think it's before I did multiple rewatchings of it, and I've actually come to appreciate this one more. I still don't like the design of Glenn and Glenda, but I understand it, why it is. But I think it ends up working in its favor because it's not just a fusion of Chucky and Tiffany. it's its own unique entity, and it's something on its own that just does its own thing.
They're so out of left field,
Yes.
and I love it.
Yeah, I was gonna say a couple years ago, back when I streamed, you and I, Nico, we did like a little horror podcast, and we both like unanimously agreed that this was the worst Chucky movie. We both hated it at that time, but since then we both rewatched it multiple times, and our hearts have changed on this movie. I was surprised because I thought like we were gonna talk here tonight, and you would just be like talking shit about this movie because that's what we were both doing like 3 years ago, but both of us have changed. So it's just been funny how we both changed in a couple of years, and we've grown to love this movie.
Yeah, and I that's why I like revisiting movies like this, is because I mean, part of the you were a big part in me starting the chiller reviews, which I've dropped off doing for a while, but I need to get back to.
Yeah.
But like these ones, it's those ones where like you have that initial gut reaction to it, and then you come back and it's like, okay, there's a lot more to this movie than like just if you're watching it surface level, it's easy to hate on.
Oh yeah.
But the more you dig, it's like, okay, this makes much more sense. It's a jab at the nuclear family. They destroy it in the beginning, and it doesn't work out in the end either.
Yeah. Oh, and then like you can keep playing off of like it takes jabs at the movie making industry. It takes jabs at, you know, scream and horror slashers in general. Like there's so much happening in this movie. And I think we're not alone in our change of hearts from being the worst Chucky to like now kind of a fan favorite. Pretty much as I was doing some digging, because I like to pull up old critic reviews of films to see like what was the waters when this came out, how is it doing now, the amount of hate this movie got out the get-go versus the amount of people who genuinely have like come back onto those reviews now. They're like, it's been years, but I love this movie. People could not stand this movie, and yet they paid a lot of money to go watch it because it almost doubled like how much it made versus how much they spent to make it, which is pretty impressive for the fifth movie in a horror franchise, not notoriously doing well in theaters, and also one that's so different than the rest of the franchise. Usually not a good sign. So people hated this movie, but I think people loved to hate this movie for a while, and then accidentally ended up liking this movie the longer they hated it.
I agree. Just like my rewatch today, it's just there's so much like talent and effort that went into this movie. It wasn't just like a cash grab. It wasn't just like we're goofing around, we're making fun of ourselves. Like this was like well like planned out and well executed. It was the plan at the time, and it was the best. It was the best they could have done with this fifth movie and this story at the time. Another thing that I will add is on Shudder, they have a like 4.5-hour documentary. It's called Doc of Chucky, where they just go over like how they made every Chucky movie. And that just has made me appreciate this movie more too. It just, going back to what I just said, there was so much like effort and so much like talent behind this movie than what you notice upon the initial viewing.
Yeah, and that's one thing with the Chucky franchise is how iconic it is within just the realm of horror. Because we've had so many killer doll movies. I know Megan came out, now 2 years ago or something? Or was it last year?
It feels both so long and so nearby.
And I know they're trying to make that into a franchise, but I don't think it's going to have the same staying power as Chucky in itself. But that's the thing is, like, I do want to do a deep dive on Chucky at some point because of how long he's lasted within the sphere of horror.
Well, and we've talked about it, and it's like Sugi said, like, if people have passion when they're working on something, even if it's not good right out the gate, even if it's not making money right out the gate, people will eventually recognize that passion and latch onto it. And Chucky, undoubtedly, for every version of it, every single time they've come out with new Chucky stuff, there has been a passion there, and that's why people like it.
Yes, I completely agree.
I know, Sugi, you're a huge slasher fan, so I know that's your jam. So it's like how mine is body horror, but
true.
I definitely I get the love for this, and I do want to come back to the show at some point because I am curious. Because don't get me wrong, I did like what was it, Cult of Chucky, the last one.
Yeah.
I did like where that stuff left off, and I know there's a reboot movie that I'm not like super interested in watching, but I know I'll get to it at some point.
I would say, and I'm very biased because I like pretty much any Chucky content. The remake with it's where Mark Hamill voices Chucky and Aubrey Plaza is one of the main actresses. I think it's actually really good. I don't like the design of the doll, but other than that, I thought the remake was really good. And then I do also, like I said earlier, just highly encourage watching the show, because the show really continues the story, and it's connected to like all of the 7 previous Chucky movies, like Child's Play 1, 2, 3, Bride, Seed, Curse, and Cult. They use characters and storylines from all 7 of those movies to make the story of the show, which is very cool. So it's like no matter like what Chucky movies are attached to, it's got something for it. So I do highly encourage that in the future, whenever you can get to it.
Well, maybe we'll have to do it and bring it back on for the show.
Definitely.
I would be honored.
So, Sugi, Seed of Chucky, do you give it on our good, bad, weird scale, what do you give this movie?
Good. Easily a good.
Chris?
For me, this one doesn't quite hit weird enough to hit the trifecta, but I do think it balances that beautiful line between good and bad, where like it's bad, but in such a fun and entertaining way. It's self-aware of where it's bad, but it has so many good points. It has great rewatchability. For me, this is a good bad.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same camp as Chris. I do like it more the third time around. I also do recognize there are some really bad parts to the movie that aren't like, they're bad, but in an entertaining way.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, outside of like the masturbating puppet, it doesn't go too far into the weird. It's pretty standard
I would say,
Chucky.
For horror, it doesn't get weird enough. And like, even for like mainstream, pretty like easygoing horror, it's still pretty light.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's the 5th Chucky. I don't think they were trying too hard to get crazy here, but
yeah. So, Sugi, do you recommend Seed of Chucky?
Yes, I do. But I would say, like you're living proof. I recommend not just watching it, but watching it 3 times.
Chris, do you recommend Seed of Chucky?
I do. I don't know if I would be as crazy as I was and watch it as many times in the last 3 days as I have. That was maybe pushing it. However, I do really recommend like getting in and like looking into the behind the scenes stuff. That was like super cool. Listening to Don talk about his creation, because he has a podcast and he talks about Chucky in depth, and he talks about this movie specifically quite a bit. Like really getting in there and like exploring it and then watching it, I think like really expands this movie's good category.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I kind of wish I had started on this earlier and gotten into the commentary of it, because the DVD or Blu-ray I've got has 2 feature commentaries.
And they're pretty solid, actually.
Yeah, I want to at some point, because again, this series I do recommend Seed of Chucky, and I'm surprised I'm saying that now.
I am too.
Yeah.
This is not how I thought this conversation was going to go.
No. If you had asked me last year, I would have said no. Don't watch this movie. It's god awful. And that's the thing. It's bad,
but it's so much fun.
Exactly.
It's so much fun. And I think that's where a lot of the angry reviews that I forced myself to read and to listen to yesterday, like, hit home. Is a lot of people watched this trying to be serious, and you can't watch this serious because this is a fun horror film.
Exactly. So, Sugi, one last question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're not going to get out of this.
Oh, dear.
Bed, behead, or wed? Chucky, Tiffany, or Glenn? Or Glenda?
Ooh, okay, let's see. I am going to kill Glenda. And I am going to wed Tiffany, and I'm going to bed Chucky. That's actually a very easy answer to the question. I love Chucky. I love Tiffany. Glenda's too young, so Glenda's got to die.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to go. Yep, that's an easy question to answer.
Yeah.
Chris, do you want to participate?
Yeah, remembering the fact that Glenda is in fact a child does really throw a wrench in this whole game. I think they're going to have to die, unfortunately. And I think Tiffany proved in this movie very well that perfect wifey material, really there to, like, try her best, even if the addiction's too much.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the exact same as you, Sugi. I don't like Glenda, so we're all children murderers on this. Puppet children murderers.
But they are related to Chucky. There's a good chance they'll be back.
Oh yeah. Screw bed Chucky and marry Tiffany because she's human too.
That's true. That's true.
So, Sugi, I appreciate you taking the time and hopping on to discuss a movie that I am also very surprised how this conversation went. Because
yeah, I came in here expecting to be like, we were going to be having some arguments about like, this is why this movie's great. No, this is why this movie's bad. And then both of you are like, oh, we love this movie. I'm like, what? This is not how this was supposed to go. We all like this movie. So this was just a pleasant surprise. So thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
No, I appreciate it. And yeah, I'm
this is a great excuse to rewatch this movie, because honestly, I don't think I would have unless you brought it up. And now I am going to be on a Chucky wormhole for at least a week.
A better idea than Bed Behead Wed Doctor Who edition.
Yeah, we would have been here a while.
Yes. And this ended up being a lot better.
Yeah. So, oh yeah, no, I was 100% planning it. So, Sugi, you got any secret Sugiverse stuff to plug?
No, I have nothing to plug. All I can tell you is if you want to watch some amazing content, it is available on Blu-ray and DVD. Check out The Chucky Show, seasons 1, 2, and 3. The story does continue. That's what I will plug. Not sponsored, but that is what I will promote, is The Chucky Show. 3 seasons are available now, DVD and Blu-ray. Support physical media.
100% right there. Anywho, this has been the Good, the Bad, the Weird podcast.
Thanks for listening.
Peace. Thank you for stopping by this here town of the good, the bad, and the weird. We appreciate your listenership, and if you want more of our takes in your life, feel free to check us out on social media at The Good, the Bad, and the Weird Podcast, or TGTBTW for short. As well, if we missed a fact, your favorite part of a movie, or just have a suggestion and want to reach out and say howdy, feel free to email us at tgtbtwpodcast@gmail.com. And feel free to join our Discord at The Good, the Bad, and the Weird Podcast, where we talk about movies, just share random banter here and there. And always check out our podcasters, streamers, or any other content creator we shout out in our episodes. We really appreciate it. And as always, thank you for listening. Peace.